Hi, this is Angie on the 4th of April. Been up since 5 with a long-time friend visiting, and we have some dots joined and some testimony to, this may not be public, but some testimony certainly to record. Louise was born in a mother and baby, Catholic mother and baby home. She was illegally adopted out at 6 days old. Her mother was told she wasn't allowed to leave unless she signed the baby away. She was adopted into a generational abuse family and victimised multiply, and had a hell of a story to tell. I'm going to introduce Louise, and I'm going to just go off camera and just let her just talk. But it's just when you get the context of it and the work I've been researching, there's a pattern emerges. This was not random as far as I can see. So I'm just going to let Louise sit here, and we'll take it on from there. Make sure we've got the speaker on. There we go. Alright, if you take a seat, and I'll just talk, really. Just talk about where you were adopted from, and just tell your story.
So my name is Louise, and I am 39 years old. I was born in 1976. I was adopted, and the whole adoption was illegal. My adoptive father, Sean, was too old to adopt, and I was also too young to be adopted. I think I was only 6 or 10 days old. I was very young. I have met my birth mum, Anne. I have a wonderful relationship with her for the last 10 years, but she lives in the UK. Her story...
Go closer to the thing, just for the volume, because I haven't got a microphone.
Her story was that she wasn't allowed to leave the mother and baby home unless that she had signed me away. She was told one morning, get me ready, that there was a couple coming to get me. And that was basically it. So she got me ready, she handed me over to the nun, and before that they got me baptised, and a godparent was her sister. And then my name was changed. My real name was actually Aisling, and they changed it to Louise when they adopted me. It was a priest that organised all the adoptions in Ireland. He was based in Castlepollard. He drove. My adoptive parents were in the car. It was a different car. My adoptive parents, I discovered, had given a large donation to the priest, or the church as they called it, for the adoption. I was brought home. They were a well-to-do family. They had a middle-class family. My father had a good paying job, and my adoptive mother was a nurse, so no questions were asked about her. I had an adoptive older brother. He was 3 years older than me. My adoptive mother, Maura, she doesn't deserve the name of mother, that's why I call her Maura. At a very young age, I was always described as a difficult child. People, when I would sort of complain to people about, these bruises I would have as a young child, the story was that I was a clumsy child. I had a good imagination, because they brought me to a psychologist or something, and he just said that she had a vivid imagination, a really good imagination, and she liked to make up stories. And this was coming from a psychologist, I suppose. I don't know why that all came about. It was probably maybe because I was saying to my teachers in school things, and she had to cover up and she had to hide. I spent all the time being told that the verbal abuse would be, you're a bastard's child, you're worthless, you're useless. It was her mood swings. So one minute she'd be washing the dishes, the next minute you walk into the room and you get a box to the face. And then she'd go back to washing the dishes. There was no reason behind the beatings. It turned out anyway that she was a secret alcoholic. She drank at home. She ended up, when I was in my late teens, going into hospital with pancreatitis, but she still denied she drank alcohol, but pancreatitis is a condition due to alcohol abuse. She was also addicted to sleeping medication, and the local doctor, because again she was a nurse, would give her the prescription without any questions asked. He would give her the prescription because again she was a nurse and she got what she wanted. All of my adopted family treated me differently, in the sense that I never felt I belonged to that family. I was always, well, she's worthless, you know that I mean. So even like a cousin, when I go to visit a cousin, he would, kiss me and stuff, and I'd say, but you're my cousin, but he thought, well, you're not my cousin, you're adopted. And I constantly got that from cousins and relations, that again, this whole thing, you're worthless, you're useless, you're just adopted. So so you had that mindset all the time. My adoptive dad, Sean, he did adore me and love me, and I do have very good memories of him, but he was a very hard-working man. He'd have a full-time job during the day, and then in the evenings he would sell insurance, because we had Maura would put a lot of demands on him. Like, we had always on holidays, we had a caravan, we went away, I had the best clothes, I had a pony, I had a good education, but from Maura you would never get a hug or I love you or anything. I was just about fed, but it's just a front for what it looked to the outside, to have this wonderful look at our perfect family with our 2 kids, etc. Then an incident happened. I was only 13, and my adopted parents went away for the weekend, and I was alone in the house with my brother that was 3 years older than me, and he came into the sitting room and he just literally grabbed me and put me on the couch, and he raped me. And he went down and opened up his piggy bank and gave me money to keep my mouth shut. Then an incident happened with a friend of his, a neighbour, a friend. I was in the first year, we went to a disco, a teenage disco, and his friend was there and he was drunk. Now, I didn't understand it all, and it turns out that I got, in my 20s, diagnosed with ADHD. And so, as an ADHD child, I didn't understand a lot of things. So when I saw his friend drunk like that, and I came home from the disco, I told my dad I saw him drunk and vomiting. I was upset, because to see this boy in that state, it was something I didn't understand, so I was kind of asking him about it and that. What I didn't realise is that my adoptive father went and told his parents that he was drunk. And this boy was again 3 years older than me. So one day, a friend of mine, Olivia, said, come up to my house to play. So I cycled up to her house, and she says, oh, let's go up to the Cairns in Lough Crew. It was a normal thing. We'd go and we'd climb the mountain, a beautiful view, wonderful place. So I thought nothing of it. So me and her walked up the mountain, and when we got to the top, to the Cairns itself, my brother and the friend were there. And he then said to me, you ratted on me, you told on me. And I of course was like, I don't know what you're talking about, what are you talking about? And she goes, your dad told my parents about me being drunk and I'm being punished. So then they sent Olivia home. They says, told her to go home, and she did. And then he turned to my brother and said to him, you go. And then he grabbed me and he threw me onto the ground. And my brother walked away, and he just sat, I don't know how far away, about 30 foot, and he sat on the ground to his back to me. And his friend then pinned me down and held me down, and he raped me. And when he was done, he said to me, that'll teach you a lesson. Now, during the whole ordeal, I was screaming at my brother to help me. Because remember, this brother of mine, when I was 5, taught me how to tie my shoelaces. And he also used to protect me from the beatings from Maura that I used to get as a child. So I was just screaming at him to help me, and he didn't do anything. Now that totally changed my life. I completely went in on myself. I wore baggy clothes. I nearly hunched back. I keep my head down. I just completely went in on myself. And the only thing that saved me, I think, was Oni and my dog and my cat. Because growing up in that house, I knew when my father was away, what I would do is I would hide from Maura, and I had a little den in the hedge that I would go to hide, and I would have the cat there. And I remember being very hungry because the money, the food shopping was being spent on alcohol. Again, Sean had he did knowledge of this because with his job he'd get his dinner out and everything. And I would stay there all day until I heard him coming home, and then I would come out of my hiding place. But Maura started, I think, on my brother with the beatings. I remember when I was only about 6, in junior infants, we were late home at lunchtime. We used to come for lunch. We were getting school photographs taken, that's why we were delayed. And we came home, and she grabbed my brother when we came in the door, and she would just be boxing him, and I was trying to stop her and say that we had photographs taken, and then she went okay, and she just walked away. There was another beating. It was a big turning point with my brother. It was just before kind of the rape from him. She was beating him one day again. I think he was discovered that he was smoking, as all teenage boys do, and we had a black hawthorn walking stick. It was a thing she liked to beat us with. But she got him one day, and she bet him, and she bet him, and she bet him, and he was unconscious on the ground, and there was blood on his back, and I tried to protect him. And when she was done, because he was unconscious, she went back to reading her book that she was reading before the beat. And I sat and I held his hand, and I sat and I prayed to God, and I prayed to God, that he would be alive, because at the time, he protected me from her. And he came conscious again, and I do believe God, did listen to my prayers. And he said to me, he said, she will never do that to me again. But he did also promise that he would try and protect me. He couldn't feel his feet. He couldn't move his feet because, again, the beatings were across his back. And eventually he's got a bit of feeling. I helped him down to the bedroom. After that day, the black hawthorn stick went missing. I presume my brother got rid of it. And also my brother then spent his days in a neighbour's farm. He got fed there, looked after there. So when he went to school, he would come from school, go straight to the farm, and he wouldn't come home till night when my father would come home. Now, unfortunately for me, it meant I was getting the full-on beatings as a result. She verbally, mentally and emotionally abused me. When I started my periods, I kept it hidden because, again, we didn't have a relationship. She discovered, say, knickers that were soiled. I didn't get a chance to kind of wash them, and I left them there in my room. That when she wasn't around, I would go and wash them out. And I was at the table in front of my father and my brother, and she threw them on the table, and she said, "I'm not washing these disgusting things. You have to do that yourself." It was very humiliating. While something like that should be celebrated because it means you've become a woman, I just felt dirty and disgusting. I had to use babysitting money to purchase my own underwear or any of my needs like that as a woman. She didn't want to help me like that. I ended up being bullied in school, of course, as well, because again, people just said I had a good imagination, I liked making up stories, so I got a lot of abuse. I then I went to college, and I couldn't cope because again, I didn't know emotionally how to deal with anything. I was restricted with half an hour of watching the telly. I had to a day, like, she was very strict. I felt like a country bumpkin with the ways of life. I didn't have a clue when I went to college. I lasted to Christmas, and I came home and I went and got a job, and then I went back to college the following year. But I ended up getting pregnant because again, I was looking for that love and approval from somebody, and you know, this man said he loved me, and I had sex with him and I got pregnant. He didn't want to know, but it meant I had to go home to them, and I stayed with them, and I had my daughter. But Maura, she did her damnedest to convince everybody that I was a bad mother, and she had to try and take Lauren off me. And see, the turning point with the abuse with Maura was 2 days before my leaving cert. She said I wasn't studying enough, and she boxed me in the face and had a bloody nose. So I didn't work hard on the leaving cert, so the course I got, well, I was just trying my best. So I told her that if she ever touched me again, I would kill her. So she never did abuse me after that turning point. But when I had my daughter, I was just turned 20. I stayed there till I was 21. I had no choice, I had no money. But she was trying to convince Sean, my dad, and my brother that I was hurting my daughter Lauren, and I would never harm a hair on her head. I loved my daughter very much, and she was just trying to do that because she wanted another thing to abuse, because again, she couldn't abuse my brother and she couldn't abuse me. Turning point came when she had them so well convinced that one night they came in and they broke down my door, and my brother bet me up and had bruises, and they took Lauren off me, and he brought her next door into the granny flat to his girlfriend, who turned out to be his wife. But I rang the guards, and the guard came out from Kells, and he said, you have to give her back, and they did. And I showed him the bruises. So the next morning I left to go to Dublin. I spent 2 nights on the floor of a little flat with my cousin. I tried to make myself homeless. I showed them the bruises. They told me I had to go home, that they had a big house and they weren't going to give me housing. Unfortunately, I had to go home. I got a job in Navan, and I moved up to Navan. I moved in with a man, again unsuitable, but it was better than the life I had. So then when my daughter turned 4, I was trying to get her into school in Navan. I couldn't. At this time I was paying for childminder. It wasn't more, I was minding her. I had to move back to Oldcastle and to get my council house. So I bought a 17-foot caravan and I put it on my parents' property. But I had to rely on Maura to mind my daughter so I could work 3 days a week. So then I discovered she was starting to hit my daughter, and it's very difficult again financially. I was trying to get somebody else to mind her. Then I got my council house and moved into it in Oldcastle, and it was tough there. Then I kind of moved on to, I met my husband, then we moved away. The day of the wedding, unfortunately, Maura had my daughter the day before the wedding, so she had filled her head with a lot of bad stuff. At the wedding, my daughter was going around saying my husband I was just after marrying was abusing her, which was total lies, but she was saying it to his family members. Now it came from Maura. Maura had completely brainwashed her to say these things. because Maura didn't want me to kind of live happily ever after. So the day after the wedding, when I discovered all this, well, first of all, there was an incident that night. There was a phone call because they were supposed to mind her. Of course, Maura was drunk, and my brother intervened, and
talk loud so that it'll be heard. Just
so
talk a bit louder.
my brother intervened and said, I don't know what's going on in the house and everything. I said, nothing's going on, it's all been made up. The next morning anyway, we went over to the house and I got my daughter, and I never had any communication with Maura, and that's been over 10 years now. So she hasn't been in our lives. Now she's done her damnedest to try and get into my life, but she hasn't. Same with my brother, so I completely cut myself off for them. It resulted in 2 years ago, a couple of years before that, I got a letter from my aunt, which is my adopted mother's sister, and the letter was pretty disgusting. It basically said the way I was treating them was wrong, considering that nobody wanted me. They were after taking me in. I should be on my hands and knees, be so grateful to them that they gave me piano lessons, they gave me a pony, and they gave me all these materialistic things, and I should be so beholden to them, and I should be this and I should be that. And I showed it to my dad, my adoptive dad, and he still wouldn't believe it all, because I have said all this to him, but he stands by his wife, and they just won't listen. I said to him that she had this down when I was 20, and that was my fault, that she had this breakdown. I said, nothing to do with me. She was a chairperson of Aware, and I said to him that, you know, that she was diagnosed with bipolar. And he says, no, she hasn't. And I said, but why is she on medication for it, and why was she in Aware? They still denied all that. He still won't believe the abuse that went on. He still is denial, and he supports her. He's now 82 years of age. She now has dementia, and I do believe people get dementia because of mental illness, or again even abuse on their body from earlier on. It can lead to them with dementia. So she still has the sick obsession with me. They still, like, the final thing was 2 years ago I received a letter from a solicitor saying that power of attorney over my parents were given to a cousin and an uncle. So in other words, I am entitled to nothing from them, to inherit or any say in them. I don't mind this, and I don't know why it was done anyway, but I don't mind this because I don't consider myself part of their family anyway, and I hadn't for a long time. But my brother, he then met a girl, I think 16 or 17, who I'm still very good friends with, and she noticed that Maura had a sick obsession with my brother, and I truly believe that she was abusing my brother. The beatings, yes, the verbal abuse, yes, but I think she was sexually abusing him as well, because he was her favourite. She idolised him. They end up giving him the house, the home place, and they lived in the granny flat. They gave him everything, and he can do no wrong. But back to the whole history of all this is, I discovered, and I truly believe that Maura herself was sexually abused. Her family, they're Cassidys. Her dad was an IRA man, but he was also a sergeant guard down in Ballyconnell. He was 17 years older than my granny. They had 9 children. She was the eldest girl. She had an older brother, Philip. And she, again, at my granny's funeral, I discovered all this kind of came out. He had died when she was 16. The family got split up because, again, they couldn't cope. She was sent to an aunt and uncle in Enniskillen, and she kind of minded their children, but they did pay for her to go to become a nurse. The eldest boy, he would have been 17, he went to the Navy. The other siblings, the next sibling after that, he was sent to a spinster aunt, but he was there 6 months. They put him in an institution, saying that he had a mental breakdown. Now the spinster aunt, she was a bit abusive verbally and used to beat him, but he was sent away. His institution, he's still there to this day. In Monaghan he was sent to an institution, so at the age of 12 he was there all his life. Then the other siblings, there was 2 girls, they were quite young. They went off and they actually married 2 brothers. And then there was another Patsy. He had autism, they called it. But again, I don't know if it was autism or again a mental breakdown. He was badly scalded as an 18-month-old child, and they reckon maybe mentally that had an effect on him. His whole body was scalded by a big pot. He was put in institution when my granny couldn't cope. He was about 25. He died from a heart attack a couple of years ago. Then there is the youngest, Morris. He was only about 6 months old, I think, when the father died. But he's never married. Alcohol in him, he goes very violent, so he keeps off alcohol. I have a suspicion actually he's gay, but again he hasn't come out about it. He has a friend in Dublin, shall we say, that he goes visits. There was another uncle, he didn't marry, he was a guard as well, he's been on his own. Maura couldn't have children, and the eldest brother couldn't have children, he adopted. The next down, he didn't have children, and then the 2 daughters, her sisters, they had children. But their children, one in particular, Anne, she has serious mental illness. She was bulimic from the age of 15. She's still not right. She tried self-harming and then suicide, but she's still not well. She's never met a man, or she's never had a relationship, and you just wonder, exactly what would happen there too. But back to my suspicions about Maura being abused. At my granny's funeral, I overheard them all talking, and they were all saying, well, you were Daddy's favourite. They had a front parlour room, their good room. She would go in there of an evening to spend time with him, and she'd come out and she'd have a penny or 2 pennies or something like that, and she'd bring them down, the other children down, her brothers and sisters, down to the shop to buy some penny sweets. And same with her older brother. And I don't think they actually realised when they said that, being the favourites, what was actually going on. She did mention that she was witness to her own mother being beaten and raped by her dad, and I suspect that she was being abused by her father. And I suppose it may have been a blessing that he passed away when she was 16, but it did leave her that she can't have children. And I wonder with the uncle why he can't have children either. So I suppose now, again, 39 years of age, I was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia. My eldest girl, who is 19, she has ADHD and dyslexia. I tried to get her diagnosed with that. My adoptive parents would intervene and said it was my parenting and there's nothing wrong with my daughter. Again, it was another reason why I have nothing to do with them. They still try their best to, for some unknown reason, have some involvement in my life. I don't understand why they keep doing this. I have 2 other children. One's nearly 9 and the other one is 11. My 9-year-old has never met my adoptive parents. My 11-year-old, she was 2 again when I stopped having contact with them, so they don't know them, thank goodness. My eldest girl, she had lots and lots and lots of counselling, and the counsellor just said to me that she's very loyal to Maura, and there's a lot of things she won't say, but she did say to me maybe in Lauren's late 20s this stuff will come out, because there's stuff there still unlocked with what happened with Maura, with my daughter. I know that Lauren has serious issues with kind of anxieties, that when I would leave when she was younger, that I wasn't coming back. So I don't know where she got that from. Of course I was going to come back to her, but again, I think Maura would say to her, well, you're not coming back. She also had to do with death, and Maura had an obsession with dying and death, and again, a lot of issues my daughter has. But I'm hoping, in her late 20s, that she would resume counselling and it would unlock whatever happened, and the truth will come out. I have confronted adoptive parents and my adoptive brother with what was going on in that house, but they just deny, and that why you're bringing this up, it's in the past. She did take the phone off my father one day and said to me, get over it, it happened, get over it, what's your problem, why are you still bringing it up? Why I'm bringing it up is because she still is abusive, and she still hasn't been answerable for what she's done. And also my adoptive family just think that, well, I was the black sheep, what would you expect, she's an adoptive child. And I know all this is wrong, because I've met my natural parents, my mum in England, and I have a nice relationship. Like, it's difficult because she's in the UK, but I know that that's who I am, my personality, the person. So I'm really trying to be me and the person who I know I am, not the person that they wanted me to be. And my caring nature, my wanting to help people.
Can you talk about the humiliation of, because our daughters go through the same thing of being with men that are taking advantage, being like too naive.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the boyfriend that got you to embezzle from your job?
Yeah. So my situation was, when I was homeless and I came back, I had to stay with them, and so the verbal and mental abuse was going on, and I had to get away. And I was introduced to this man who was a cousin of a good friend. He was 10 years older, and of course he started turning my head, and he started saying, I can help you, because I tried, even though I had a part-time job, I tried to rent, and nobody would let me rent because I was a single mother, even though I had a job. And he said to me, I'll put my name down on a house, and I'll help you rent. All I ask is in the sheds, that can I keep stuff in the sheds? Now, we did kiss and we did sleep together the odd time, but it wasn't about that with him. It was more, to kind of get inside my head. And because I was in such a desperate place and I had such low self-esteem, and I did think that I was worthless, and now I'm a single mother, so I'm even more worthless to people, that I allowed this man to kind of get into my head. And I was just so happy to be away from Maura and get this bit of attention from this older man. And he knew how to play me and play on my good nature and everything. And I realised, no, this is a dangerous man, I need to get away. So I got this tiny basement flat. You see, how it happened was, I saw into the shed and I saw what was in the shed. It was stolen goods that he was selling from England to kind of the north and that. And then just before I left, he brought me out to his car one day and he opened the boot and he was showing me again the stuff that he was selling, which was, again, drugs. I didn't know the drugs. But I also noticed the handgun, and I didn't say anything about the handgun, but it scared me enough that I needed to get away from him. So I moved into a flat in Virginia, a basement flat, very, very, very basic, to try and get away from him. But he started kind of hounding me and saying I had to help him and I had to help him. He was asking me about my job that I did. I, of course, stupidly told him that the boss would leave blank checks when he'd go away, that I could sign, you know, if something needed paying, that they were signed by my boss. And he came to me one day then and he said, I want to do one of those checks. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And then he said, because my daughter was, I think, 2 at the time, he said, that's a beautiful little girl you have. It would be a shame if anything was to happen to her. Now, I had to believe him. Like I said, I saw the handgun. I've also listened to stories of how he was treating other people. A friend of mine, that, and I knew there was another girl who had a barring order against him. But, you know, he was still getting into the house, into her bed and that. So I knew I couldn't get away from this man. And I thought the only way I could get away from him was just steal the check, give it to him, and then, you know, he would just leave me alone, I thought. Because again, I was young and I didn't really understand. So I stole the check and he came over to my flat and he said to me, I need you to write it. And I says, I can't do that. He says, you have to write it. And again, I was scared of him, because the stories of how he hurt other people that didn't do what he wanted them to do, I felt I had no choice, so I wrote it for 60,000 euros. And I went back to my job, and again, I pretended like this wasn't happening. And he went to Galway, and he got a relation of his to lodge the cheque. And then he went to try and take money out, and he managed to get 6,000 euros from the 6,000.
Or pound.
It was pounds at the time, before the euro change. So of course my employers discovered about the cheque and the money, and I got arrested that morning at my place of work. The guards brought me and my employer and his daughter and everybody else. Basically the guards let them have a go at me and call me all the names under the sun, and I was this and I was that, and we trust you and you did this to us. See, nobody knew it was this man who put me under duress to commit this crime. So I had about half an hour of getting abuse from these people, and the guards stood there and they allowed it. I was brought off to Kells Guard Station. I gave every bit of information I could about this man, his contacts, his names. Then they tried to say, is this you muling drugs over from the UK? I said, that's not me, and I don't even have a passport. And then he said, well, you don't need a passport. Again, I didn't know all this, but he had other people doing jobs for him around drugs. When they arrested him in that girl's bed, the one that had the barring order. So it goes to show you that, you know, you couldn't get away from this man. I didn't have any faith in the guards protecting me from him. I felt I had to steal this cheque, because if I'd gone to them, they would just, there was nothing they could do, because he hadn't committed a crime as such. So I couldn't get away from him, and I had no faith in them to help me. And of course my life was hell then in Oldcastle. Everybody calling me a thief and this, that and the other, and again nobody knew that this man was behind it all. Then I also took out a loan myself of £6,000 and gave it to him. And again, I was in a lot of financial difficulty with that, because I couldn't repay it, and I was brought to court, and my adoptive father bailed me out and gave me €2,000, which I of course repaid over time. So then 6 months after that event, the guard rang me and said we were going to charge you. I had to go down to Oldcastle Court. I had to stand in front of all the people from Oldcastle, and I said I was guilty, which I was. I said I was guilty, Your Honour. I stole the cheque. I wrote the cheque because I had no choice. I couldn't prove that he threatened my life. I just said it was under duress. Again, if you can't prove hearsay, you can't prove it, but I did fear for my life, and I did what I did, and I thought it was the only way I could get away from this man, because I felt the guards couldn't help me with him. I got a 2-year bound to the peace and a 6-month suspended sentence. That was carried through to him because he was up on stabbing another person in Oldcastle, again to do with drugs, and so he changed. So this was again count against that, and then there was this with stealing of the cheque. He pleaded he was not guilty because I pleaded guilty. He had to change his plea to guilty. He was tried in the circuit court. He got I think he got 5 years for the stabbing of the man, and I think he got 5 years for the cheque. But the thing is, they were ran concurrent, as in together. Now, I did fear for my life when he was arrested. He did threaten in the cells, because I was in a different cell, that he was to keep my mouth shut, he was going to kill me. The guards heard all this. That's why they said it would be better if we'd done you for the cheque than you give evidence against him. They said then he wouldn't come after me. When I was in Oldcastle and I was living there, I didn't know he got early release. The guards didn't tell me. And then there was an incident one night, and they tried my back door, him and a friend, in my house, and they tried the front door, and they were looking for me. I rang the guards in Kells, and of course they said it'd be a few hours before they could get there, etc. Anyway, then I lived in fear for my life because I didn't know it was him. I didn't know he was out. I just knew there was somebody trying to get into my house at night, and I was scared. And then another night I rang the guards. I said there's somebody again, and lucky enough there was an unmarked Garda car in the area looking for somebody else, and they picked him up and his friend up. They found a handgun, a shovel and black bags in the boot.
Oh, God. Okay, we'll up there. We'll do a part 2 because it only does 45 minutes.
Okay.
I just want to thank Louise, and we'll go on to a part 2 because I have reason to believe that there was actually a ring operating in and around Oldcastle, and all the dots are joining.
Yeah.
Which one says stop? Is it that one or the middle?
Hi again, it's Louise here.
Go close and speak loud for volume, 'cause I haven't got a microphone yet.
Hello, it's Louise here. I just want to clarify a few things from part 1, particular about when my daughter was at the wedding. I said about, she was saying things about my husband. I suppose what she was saying, it was to do with that my husband was hitting her, and which were completely untrue. But that's kind of what it was about, that he was abusing her that way, that he was hitting her, but it's completely untrue. And like I said, my daughter has had a lot of therapy and counselling, and that has all been proven within the counselling sessions. Another big thing with the counselling sessions, she went to a few, and then I was brought into a room with a social worker and a counsellor, and they said to me they couldn't discuss what was said between Lauren and them, only that they told me that I shouldn't have any contact with my adoptive parents, and Lauren should not have any contact with my adoptive parents, in light of things that were brought up in the private sessions. So again, it was more reason for me not to have contact with them. Where I left off, yes, so I moved away from Oldcastle with my husband, and we had a little girl at the time, and it was good for me because it helped me to sort out a lot of things in my life, and I went and got educated and trained. I was volunteer with the Irish Red Cross, and I learned, it became an EMT, because again my nature is wanting to help people. So I did the medical training, and then I became a trainer. So I now train people in a variety of different things, from health and safety to first aid to lots of other things, and I really, really enjoy it. And I work with people from every walk of life, from inner city Dublin, to other groups and organisations that I suppose other trainers wouldn't go into. And it was said to me, how can you go and train people like that, maybe people with addiction problems, and people that were in prison? They said to me, are you not scared working with people like that? And I said no, because to me, I knew evil. She called herself my mother. So to be honest, those people I wouldn't be afraid of. I wanted to say that. So I think I have come a long way, and practicing mindfulness and getting help for myself, and it's been a difficult road. Getting the diagnosis of ADHD has helped a lot. Unfortunately, I'm still isolated. Trust is a major issue. I let my guard down with a lot of people, and then they would just take advantage of me, and that seems to be the common trait, whether it be relationship with a boyfriend to relationship with people in general. They kind of, I allow and don't say no to these people. I let them sort of, you can help me and do that, but they really are kind of more taking advantage of my good nature, and I can help them in that way. I'm learning to try and say no to people, and I had to also learn to love myself and accept myself for the person I am. I'm trying to live my life the way I want to live it, not to please others. Unfortunately, a lot of people were not happy with this, but if they truly wanted to be my friend, they would accept this about me. I know particularly Angie has, which has been wonderful. And there's other people have too, but a lot of other people don't understand it. And they're saying, when you start standing up to them and saying, no, I'm not going to do that, and I don't want to do that, and they get quite annoyed with me. But this is me trying to be true to myself and true to me. So I love my children. I would do anything for them. I love my doing training and helping people like that to try, teaching people how to save a life. And I've had people come back to me and thank me for the training, that they had to use their first aid skills and it helped to save a life. And that is wonderful to me. I suppose the upsetting thing is, back to the adoptive family, they still, they would go on about, cousin, and she's got a degree, and she's got this and she's got that, and fancy cars and big beautiful houses. And I just say to them, but I'm teaching people how to save lives, and I think that is more important to me, is helping people and giving the skills that maybe one day they would be able to help somebody, and feel confident to do that. And I am working on it, and I'm working on myself, and it is hard work, particularly with my marriage breaking up maybe 4 years ago, which was hard to accept. I kind of spent a year working on it, which I thought we were working on it. Still kind of don't understand it, and it's hard to come to terms with, because I completely let my guard down and let him in and trusted him, and like that he is a wonderful father. He would do anything for his children. It is hard, because again it's more rejection all the time, being rejected by people, and I don't understand why. Alex says I'm a good person, I would help anybody out, and like with my past, it was difficult, and it did affect me what happened to me. Like when I was 18, I met a boy, and first love, and we decided to sleep together, and I said that it was my first time. Of course, when we did, he didn't believe me, and again he dumped me, and as a result of that, it crushed me completely. And I kind of spent a good 10 months going around using and abusing people, men, having a few boyfriends on the go at the same time, because I just didn't care about myself. I really didn't care, and I wanted to die, and I just allowed them to use and abuse me, do whatever they want, just give them what they want. I didn't care anymore about myself. When I was in my teenage years, like that, I would starve myself, and then sometimes I'd put a plastic bag over my head, you know, till I would lose consciousness, as a way of release for all the pain. You know, I did hit an all-time low in Oldcastle. My daughter was going to the school there. I was trying to get her diagnosed, and again, nobody would believe me. I pulled her out of the school for 2 weeks. I tried to move to a different school, and of course the priest at the time was on the board of management of all these different schools, and he came to a meeting, and he said, he just came into the meeting. Now, I did bring my adoptive father with me because he was a minister of the Eucharist, and he would be known by, you know, the priest, and I brought him to kind of help with changing her with the school. And the priest came into the meeting, and he sat down, and he folded his arms, and he just said, "I know all about you." And I says, "Excuse me?" He goes, "I know all about you, and your daughter has to go back to that school, and you're not changing school." He said, "How else would you expect your daughter to behave when you're a single mother living on a council estate?" And with that, I stood up, and I did swear at him, and I said to him that my daughter had a right to an education, and that I was going further with this. And my adoptive dad stood up, and again, he is a quite religious man. He goes to Mass every day, minister of the Eucharist, and he said to me that he was a disgrace to his collar. So when I returned home, I did contemplating, you know, taking my own life and my daughter's life, by taking overdose with sleeping medication, and then I realised, you know, no, I can't. You know, I love her too much, and I can't do that, you know, to her, even to myself. And that's, I suppose, when I did meet my husband then, Kieran, and you know, he helped me, and then I met my mum that Christmas in England, and I moved away to Virginia, and then we got married. Like I said, I had my daughter, my middle child, and then we got married and moved over to where we are now. And yes, I made a lot of silly mistakes, and you know, again, didn't care about myself, and you know, as I'm saying, it's just things that I did, and you know, I am ashamed of, but at the time I just felt that there was no option. So I don't really want to mention that.
No, that's fine. Okay. Anything else? No, just anything else.
So I'd like to thank you for listening to my story, and I'll pass you on to Angie.
Yeah, no, every survivor that does a disclosure takes enormous confidence, courage, and risks backlash. There's often backlash, and but it's worth it for the amount of more victims that come forward and say, "Thank you, you told my story," and you know, I was suicidal and I decided it was the end of the road. And I'm ashamed to say that I also contemplated suicide for myself and Gabriella when she was about 4, and I spent about 2 days trying to figure out how to do it, because I couldn't bear the thought of if either of us survived. Like, what if I died and Gabriella was, you know, brain damaged or something, because I was thinking of doing it with a hose pipe to the exhaust of the car. And then, or even worse, what if she died because she was only 4 and I survived? Well, then all I would want to do was commit suicide again. And fortunately, again, the hand of God, I got in touch with Gail, who by then was a social worker. She's actually, I don't know if she's still, I think she might have retired, but she was in charge of adoptions in Wiltshire. And I just phoned her and said, I'm thinking of ending it and bringing Gabriella, because I can't get her away from the family. I can't protect her. No matter where I run to, even as far as California, I'm still met with paedophiles. I don't know how it's done, but everywhere I go for safety, there's a paedophile waiting. It was just, I started to think that the whole world was just full of paedophiles, or it must be that I was attracting them somehow, or you know, and I made my mind up when I had children that it would never happen to my children what happened to me. But if you're in a generationally abusive family, and if it's organised, you're trapped. It's very structured, and you're tracked as well. Wherever you go, it's like, okay, they're here, they're there, right? So I'm so glad I phoned Gail, and I'm so glad she's talked to me. And I had a plan. I was going to leave Gabriella to the only cousin I thought out of the whole extended, messed up 150 people family. I thought, well, she might have a chance if I asked Shireen to raise her. But I just felt like I couldn't protect my daughter from my family. They kidnapped her on one occasion. They were trying to prove me an unfit mother and then get her adopted by a different sister. And my boys were kidnapped in Oldcastle, and that was colluded in by the guard, Hugh Brady, by the doctor, Hanley, by the school, everybody in strategic positions, trying to get my children taken from me and given to people that I felt were abusive and a danger to them. And 5 days my boys were kidnapped and literally taken off their bicycle outside my house, the bike thrown on the grass, and the child gone. And then lied. I would go into the school, and that they would hide my son, and then the guard and the headmaster would say he's not in school, he hasn't been attending. And then just the grace of God, little boy would come home and say, well, Jamie was there, Angie, Jamie was there, they hid him. Colluded in by Jenny Williams, tried to hijack Josh off a bus on the way back from a school trip. I hid Josh in safety in Wicklow, they went and found him. It literally was as if it's bad enough that, because as abuse survivors we could think, right, I won't live in the past, I won't whistle blow, as long as I could just raise my children in safety. But it's never enough. The more you stay silent around paedophiles, the more they, it's not enough that they've ruined your life, they'll go after your children too, unless you draw a line in the sand. So I got my children back after 5 days, even though I was in a desperate state. I don't know how I kept it together, but John Pryor, the solicitor, wrote me a letter, and I issued letters to the guards, the school, the doctor, everybody that was colluding to take the children. I issued solicitors' letters, and they backed off. But I wasn't, it was very hard to do what Louise has done and grab her children and run to safety and keep them safe. And the children can be so trauma bonded to the grandparents or the uncles or whoever else has been part of their life, even though they know they've been physically abused or sexually abused or both, or emotionally, psychologically abused. But it's this thing of where I used to work with wounded children, you could rescue a child from a home where they were being raped and they'd run back because they were homesick. It was familiarity. They thought, well, it's not all bad, or the paedophiles would know that it was time to spoil them again. That's what trauma bonding is. You do something horrendous, then you do something wonderful, then you do something horrendous, and it's so insidious like that. And also the thing of, let me just see where we are for time, and my glasses there. Sorry. They're on the bed, I think. See where? Yeah, there. Are they? Or you can just tell me where we're at with time. Sorry, what's that say?
16.
Oh, that's very short.
Yeah.
Okay, the other thing I just wanted to address was this tactic of discrediting the victims by either getting them to be complicit, which was what was happening to Gabriel and Lisa, or convincing them that they're complicit, or framing them. And, Louise talked about the assault to try and discredit not only her but her husband. They tried to say she was a bad mother and unfit, and she managed to disprove that. Then, because the husband looked like he was going to rescue her and get her away from the toxic family, so then they started, to try and build a case against him being physically abusive, which was also discredited. But it's a very common tactic. Part of the smear campaign against me online at the moment is trying to say I murdered my sister, and even more absurd, trying to say I'm a paedophile. So the very thing that you're trying to expose, they will try and accuse you of, to discredit you. And I remember my daughter's father, who molested her, Antonio Strano, school teacher, published author, property millionaire developer in California at the time, fled the country when I got a polygraph test organised in Manzanita in Sausalito, fled the country to Cambodia and Fiji and Bangkok, I think is his latest Gary Glitter type location. But on his last visit, and at this stage the social workers had said the same to me, you're not to let him have any unsupervised access to your daughter. And at the time he still had me convinced that Gabriella was making it up, that he had never molested her. But I agreed to the unsupervised because a part of me knew deep down, even though I believed him with my head, but something inside me knew that it was good advice from the social services not to allow unsupervised access to him. But he came on a visit where it's very possible that he didn't just re-abuse my daughter, it's very possible that he abused another child, so we say at this stage. And then he set about a little insurance policy of trying to portray me as an abusive, violent mother. And I didn't discover the full cleverness of it until years later, because he got my parents involved. And so I think I've already said in a video that I would use corporal punishment with my children maybe 2 or 3 times a year. I was single parenting 3 children. You know, I was wounded. I was learning as fast as I could how to be a good parent, because I had no concept of what a good parent was. But I did use a wooden spoon or a slipper or whatever. And on one occasion we were living in Pollockhill. The boys were little. They were like 1 and 3, 1 and 4, something like that. And Gabriella had already been somebody, I haven't established who, but somebody was already training Gabriella to be bullying to them. And so she was being naughty with the boys, and I was gardening. We were all sitting out in the garden, and I was gardening, the boys were playing, Gabriella was tormenting them. She was 8 years older, and I told her about 3 times to stop doing that to Joshua, or stop hurting Joshua, or stop making Joshua cry, something like that. And she kept doing it, and so I was raking leaves or something, and I chased her around the garden with the rake. I didn't catch up with her, and I didn't hit her with it. But her father then did a very leading chat with her. Does your mother ever hit you? Oh yes. And what does she use? Oh, she chased me with a rake yesterday. Oh my goodness, is that a metal rake? Yes. And oh my goodness. And then he made sure he wrote a very long detailed letter to my parents, and you know, I really feel that I should really have contacted social services, you know, if Angela's violent with the children and a danger to them. But I'll trust you that you'll keep an eye on things. And but he was documenting it, and I've got the letter. My daughter ended up giving it to me. My mother gave it to her years later, and she read it with horror, and she said, "Oh, Mum, can you believe this? He had woven a web so that in the event that I ever believed Gabriella's disclosure, which I did about a year later, and in the event that I ever tried to whistleblow, he thought he had a little insurance policy to prove me a violent, abusive parent." And that was foiled. But that's how clever they are. So whatever one is trying to expose, they will try and tie you with the same brush to silence you. And on a deeper level, when it's very dark, ritual, satanic abuses, such as the Hampstead case, they will actually force the children to participate in murder and abuse of others and so on. David Shurter's got some amazing, devastatingly tragic stories in his book Rabbit Hole, a satanic ritual abuse survivor's life story. You can find that online or on Amazon. So just, yeah, this goes very deep. It's very structured. It's very strategic. It's like a cancer, and it's very, very prevalent. The story made me go cold just listening to Louise talk about the priest trying to stop her taking the child out of the school. Very disturbing. Thanks for listening. That's Louise's disclosure, and you know, we appreciate your prayers. And if you want to get in touch, if you've been triggered, if there's anything that you want to disclose, corroborate, help in any way, I'll post a link, you know, to help me continue doing this work. It's very dangerous. But just basically, thanks for listening, and keep telling the truth. If you want to protect your own children and stop generational abuse, whistle blow. God bless. Which one says stop? Is it the middle one again? Louise, I haven't got my